Dutch van der Linde was born in 1855, making him 44 years old as of the time of Red Dead Redemption 2. Dutch was a rebellious child, and since he didn't get along well with his mother, and his father died in the Civil War and the Battle of Gettysburg, he left home at the age of 15 to start a life of crime. As Dutch grew up, his visions of his ideal world started to show more. Dutch becomes the leader of a gang under his own name, the members of which I will mention in a bit. Dutch is a tall, strong, imposing guy, which is perfect for the role he serves as leader of his gang. To begin with, Dutch is caring of his gang members, whom he considers his family, a bit anarchic, idealistic, and motivated to become rich and create a savage utopia of sorts to live in. For some more background info, in the 1870s, Dutch met con artist Hosea Matthews, who when trying to rob each other, were impressed with each other's skills, and thus founded the van der Linde gang. In 1877, they encountered 14-year-old Arthur Morgan. Arthur was taught by the two to read, write, shoot, and ride horses. These three individuals comprised what was called the Old Guard and the van der Linde gang. In the same year, Dutch met a man named Colm O'Driscoll, who would turn out to be his sworn enemy. In 1885, the gang met 12-year-old John Marston after he was sentenced to hanging by some homesteaders. Both John and Arthur are considered by Hosea and Dutch to be sons of theirs. The gang spent their early years together robbing banks and handing out money to the less fortunate, deeming themselves to be Robin Hoods. This is when the gang became wanted. Some other members joined, such as Bill Williamson, Javier Escuela, Sean McGuire, Lenny Summers, and most importantly, Micah Bell. Now we get into the events of Red Dead Redemption 2.
Don't want to kill any of you, but trust me, we will. Wake them up a little!
This whole thing is pretty much done. We're more ghosts than people.
You have got to keep faith. They will not crush us.
Good old Dutch. My best friend. You know how we met? Pair of hucksters trying to rob each other. Back in 78 or thereabouts.
You have to love yourself a fire. It's one of the blessings. Sure, we can have fire. And we can have the knowledge of fire. But with that comes the knowledge of everything.
At the beginning of the game, the gang gets stuck up in the mountains up north while avoiding the Pinkertons. The gang robs a train owned by a powerful man named Cohenwall. Remember this for later. But this part of the game gives us some time to get more well introduced with the gang. Arthur Morgan is the main protagonist of Red Dead Redemption 2, and the first endorsed into the van der Linde gang. Easily the closest character to Dutch besides Hosea, and Dutch sees him as a son. Arthur influences Dutch in many ways, and vice versa, and Arthur will be the driving point for some of the biggest character changes with Dutch and the gang. Hosea Matthews was, as stated, the one to start the gang with Dutch. He's kind and reliable, as Arthur wrote of him as a father. John Marston was the youngest when introduced to the gang, and is the character with the strongest friendship with Arthur. They see each other as brothers, and although John is a little less intelligent, he is just as loyal. I'm pretty sure that's all the characters that are needed to know about.
Hey guys, it's me Eduardo. I'm going to talk about Javier Escuela. So Javier Escuela was basically a runaway Mexican immigrant who joined Dutch's gang in search of, a community and safety, and he found it with Dutch van der Linde, and he grew up to idolize Dutch as kind of like a father figure, and he always felt like he was in debt to Dutch. And so he was always like a cool gang member. He was always there to give out a helping hand, and he was also Mexican. He also appears later in the first Red Dead Redemption 1 game.
Thank you, Eduardo, for talking about the greatest video game character of all time. Mr. T, you have to give him extra credit. Anyways, this is when the story starts to pick up a bit, in which I will save you from hearing about a lot of the details, and I'll just talk about the ones that involve Dutch's character development. Speaking of, how is Dutch doing at this point in the story? Well, this is as good a time as any to mention Dutch's hubris. Dutch is very prideful of the family and name he's made of himself. At this point in the story, Dutch still detests his rival gang leader Colm O'Driscoll's way of thinking, leaving his men to die and treating them as disposable assets on his endeavors. However, like I said, Dutch is prideful. Because of his influence and guidance towards the gang, and being the cause of their survival, he becomes a little too wrapped up in his infamous plans to create a new world.
Plan! One last time! We get some money and get the hell out of there. That's the plan. I had a plan! I still have a plan! I ain't got a final plan yet. I have a plan. You just have to trust me.
He feels as if everyone in the gang needs to follow his instruction in order to survive, and he starts to develop a kind of savior complex, which is one of the aspects of his hamartia. More on that later though, let's keep going. The gang gets off the mountain, and because of Dutch's guidance and instruction, they made it safely to a place named Horseshoe Overlook with good fortune. However, there are threats of the Pinkertons coming, but Dutch insists on the gang staying in Horseshoe Overlook. It's around this time that Arthur Morgan gets tuberculosis beating someone up on behalf of the gang, and starts to change the way he sees in life and how he interacts with others. This will be very important for Dutch's character later on. There's a lot of story left in the game to cover, so I will just kind of summarize some of the events that happen. Early on, John Marsden gets kidnapped, and there are talks of a truce with the O'Driscoll gang. However, the Pinkertons are gaining on the Vanderlyn gang, so they start to move from place to place, making Dutch angry and paranoid, getting more aggravated with his fellow gang members and family. A character betrays the gang, and Dutch murders them in a brutal way, dunking their head underwater in a swamp and feeding them to the alligators within.
Filth has got to be disposed of. Our friends the Pinkertons are gonna come and rescue you, you repulsive little maggot. Call them now. You call them.
Jesus. Part of your philosophy books cover feeding a fella. Good goddamn alligator, Dutch.
The part that covers weakness.
This action surprises Hosea and Arthur, as they had rarely seen this level of aggression from Dutch. With this action, the line between where Dutch stands and the aspects of Colm O'Driscoll, Dutch's sworn enemy, seem to fade. Dutch becomes more of what he wishes not to be. Later, the gang decides to rob a bank in the town of Saint Denis. Dutch's best friend and partner, Hosea, makes it a distraction attempt when the robbery is hijacked. This leads quickly to his capture, and he's held hostage in front of the rest of the Vanderlyn gang. After some tension, Hosea is shot and killed in the street, changing something within Dutch.
You can always cut a deal.
I've given you enough chances.
Come on!
No! God damn it!
There's your deal, Dutch.
Hosea.
This is Dutch's peripety, his change in fortune. Although the gang did a lot of running around, they were all together and in good spirits. With the death of the oldest member of the Vanderlyn gang, and Dutch's best friend, Dutch becomes more hostile towards the other gang members. He starts to believe that there is a mole within the gang, and he lashes out at others because of his newfound paranoia. And because of Dutch's actions from this point forward, the rest of the Vanderlyn gang, excluding one, start to have less hope and faith in Dutch, distancing themselves from him. And from this point onwards, one gang member in particular, Micah Bell, starts to influence and change Dutch's decision-making for the rest of the story. Because Dutch lost his best friend, he's at a point of weakness, and he kind of resorts to other people to make the decisions for him and kind of make him a lot more aggressive. When the gang tries to leave from this entire standoff, other members are shot and killed, such as young Lenny Summers, who Arthur stops to mourn while being chased. Dutch, however, is no longer fazed by the deaths of his fellow gang members, who he considered to be his family. The gang escapes and leaves on a boat the following morning. On the island they arrive on, they are taken prisoner, and after a long struggle, they escape. When they return home, Arthur and some others plan to rescue John Marston, but are told by Dutch not to because he believes that John is the mole. There's a standoff between Dutch and Cornwall, and Dutch emerges victorious, killing Cornwall. This shows even more evidence that Dutch is becoming what he said he would never be, a killer.
You kill, I kill. You rob, I rob. Only difference I can see is I choose whom I kill and rob, and you destroy everything in your path.
I've heard just about enough.
I'll tell you what, you give me this ship, $10,000 and safe passage out of here, I'll let you live.
I'll do no such thing.
You sure? Good. I prefer it this way. You lost your mind!
You can see that Dutch immediately contradicts his statement about choosing who to rob or kill because he instantly takes action and kills Cornwall. He also mentions how he prefers it that way, leaning into the idea that Dutch is getting a little bit more crazy in the head and starting to lose it. Meanwhile, John is rescued, and at this time, Dutch's sworn enemy, Colm O'Driscoll, is sentenced to hanging. There was a planned intervention where he'd be rescued by his men. However, the Vanderlyn gang steps in and prevents this, and O'Driscoll dies. At this point, many of the gang members have left, deciding that staying with Dutch, the man they used to look up to and admire, is too dangerous to continue doing now, and so they pursue other paths in life. This only worsens Dutch's paranoia, and he calls all those who left traitors. After this, the gang goes to rob a train, and while doing so, John gets shot and falls off the train. Dutch says he'll try to save him, but makes no attempt to do so, and lies to the remaining members of the gang, telling them that he died. Right after that, John's soon-to-be wife gets arrested, and Micah, the one influencing most of Dutch's decisions after he shows weakness, convinces Dutch to leave her. It's at this point that Dutch is approaching his downfall. He's betrayed his family and friends, becomes so anxious as to where his decisions have become irrational and the consequences are massive, even fatal for some. Jumping a little bit farther in the story, Arthur finds out that Micah has been the mole all along, and is stringing Dutch along to use him for money and fame. There's a confrontation between all of them when John returns and proves that he's still alive, exposing Dutch's lie to the group. The standoff lasts for a while, and even though Dutch doesn't intervene, John and Arthur run away from their predicament. They're chased down, but the pursuers fail to catch them. John and Arthur decide to make their way up to the mountains where Dutch, Micah, and some others went in an attempt to rob the train. But before that...
Arthur, come on, let's go. You go. Keep pushing, Arthur.
No. No. I think I've pushed all I can.
Come on.
You go.
We ain't got time for this, not now.
We ain't both gonna make it. Go. Now. I'll hold them off. It would mean a lot to me. Please. There ain't no more time for talk. Go.
Arthur.
Go to your family.
Arthur!
Get the hell out of here and be a goddamn man.
You're my brother.
I I know.
Arthur moves up the mountain, and after gunning down Micah's goons, he has a fight with Micah himself. Dutch shows up, and Arthur pleads with Dutch to leave Micah, and Micah tries to convince Dutch to leave Arthur. This brings us to the climax of Red Dead Redemption 2.
Come on. Dutch. Let's go, buddy. We made it. We won. Come on.
John made it.
He's the only one. The rest of us... No. But I tried. In the end, I did. Come on. Let's go. We can make it. Come on, Dutch. Come on! Ah!
This is the most pivotal moment for Dutch in the entire franchise, and the moment with his anagnorisis and downfall. Dutch realizes that he was the one that ripped the gang apart with his selfishness and greed. His pride and ambitious visions of the future got in the way of his relationships with the others, treating them horribly, and standing before Arthur in his last moments, he turns around and leaves both Arthur and Micah, not wanting to pick a side. After this is the true start of Dutch's downfall, where he spirals into insanity with the destruction of the Vanderlyn gang, but that will also be explained in a moment. Eight years after what happened, John hears about the location of Micah and Dutch, who apparently reunited for their hopes of the future. So John makes his way up to the snowy mountains, where he interacts with Dutch and Micah. In the end, Dutch shoots Micah and once again leaves.
You shot me. You shot me pretty good.
Thank you.
This is the end of Red Dead Redemption 2.
I love you, Dutch, but please fix those plans. Vanderlyn, I'm always by your side. Poker plans, I've got a plan, Arthur. Vanderlyn, I'm always by your side. Poker plans, I've got a plan, Arthur.
Now that that's over with, I gotta wrap this up because this is rapidly approaching 20 minutes. Between this and the events of Red Dead Redemption 1, Dutch recruits many new gang members, having his downfall in full swing between games. He treats his new recruits as tools to succeed with whatever plans he may have. He's become exactly like Colm O'Driscoll and has delved deeper into his insanity. He pledges freedom to his gang members and a promising future for them, but it is not ensured. This is also when his hamartia is in full swing. He now has an unrelenting savior complex which he uses to persuade his followers into doing what he wants them to do. This was seen earlier with the Vanderlyn gang, but with Dutch lost all of those who he loved, he had nothing left to lose or hide, and became completely lost in his head. To wrap up the story, in Red Dead Redemption 1, John Marston is threatened by the government to never see his family again. They give him the objective to hunt down the remaining living members of his old gang to see his family again. These members include Billy Williamson, Javier Escuela, and Dutch Vanderlyn himself. Over the course of the game, John encounters all of these people and has multiple exchanges with Dutch. He ends up living through them though, and killing many innocent people, fully showcasing the insanity that he's gone to. However, at the end of the game, John corners him to a cliffside where he gives his final plan.
I got a plan, John.
You always got a plan, Dutch.
This is a good one.
I don't doubt it.
We can't always fight nature, John. We can't fight change. Can't fight gravity. We can't fight nothing. My whole life, all I ever did was fight.
Then give up, Dutch.
But I can't give up, neither. I can't fight my own nature. That's a paradox, John. You see?
Then I have to shoot you.
When I'm gone, they'll just find another monster. They have to. Because they have to justify their wages.
That's their business.
Our time has passed, John.
Thank you for watching this really long 20+ minute video on Dutch Vanderlyn. And thank you, Mr. T, for this kind of whole project thing. This is kind of some of the most fun I've had with the assignment ever. So thank you again. And here is one last ode to the Vanderlyn gang.
Well, let me have a rule and a saw and a board and I'll cut it. I'll climb up a ladder with a hammer and a nail and I'll nail it. Well, we worked so hard to build a little house together. In the snow or the rain or the ice cold wind, whenever. No matter what the weather, we're together. Let me have a rule and a saw and a board and I'll cut it. Climb up a ladder with a hammer and a nail and I'll nail it. Well, we worked so hard to build a little house together. In the snow or the rain or the ice cold